And what I wish more people knew or understood is that curiosity and confidence is going to outrank your credentials.
I love that. It's a perfect way to kick off today's conversation. Welcome to UnCeiling You, the podcast where we unlock what's holding you back so that you can rise into your full potential. I am your host, Dr. Natalie Luke, and whether you're brand new or returning, I'm so glad you're here. We're in season 3, which is all about building community around you because none of us rise alone. In part 1, we focused inward. And now in part 2, we're connecting authentically. We're learning how to build meaningful relationships, ask for help, and create networks that truly support our goals. Today, you'll meet Brianne Rush, founder of the Independence Lab. She helps Gen Z women step confidently from college into their careers. And she's here to show how curiosity, courage, and connection can accelerate your growth faster than any resume ever will. If you want to go deeper, all the links are waiting for you in the show notes. Now, let's dive in. Brianne Rush, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you coming on to share your expertise. I know that our UnCeiling You listeners and ripple makers will really appreciate this conversation.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, Natalie. Thank you.
You're welcome. Early in your career, you built momentum by asking strangers for interviews, and that takes guts. It's also a foundation of a strategic relationship building process and networking. So what did those early conversations teach you about making authentic connections, and how can new professionals or people that are ready to transform their careers take these kinds of approaches today to start conversations?
Yeah, my degree is actually in journalism. And so I know I like the writing part, but it taught me that you have to actually speak to people, interview them to pull out the stories that they have. And so I applied that early in my career and throughout my career by learning that an interview is really just a conversation with somebody, right? So it's about listening to their story and understanding their point of view and what they bring to the world. And the beauty in that is that you learn these different points of view. You learn these little nuggets, these very valuable lessons that you can apply to yourself. And I used that, of course, in my daily work. But then what I did was apply that across the board when I was trying to move up in my career, when I was changing careers. I would simply just talk to people and listen to what they had to say. Their stories were very inspiring. They taught me a lot. It changed my point of view. It changed my passions. And it's such a valuable skill set to build that I'm hoping that anybody who's interested in learning about a new role, a new industry, a new job, any of those things can use that to further their career and further their life.
So what's one mistake that you see Gen Z professionals making when trying to network or connecting with someone influential? And maybe define what is Gen Z for the folks that are listening.
Yeah, Gen Z is the younger generation now. They're not quite millennials. They're older than Alpha. So they are right now in college and coming into the workplace. They are young adults in the workplace mostly now. And a mistake that I'm seeing, and it's kind of a result of the world that they grew up in, right? Where they're texting, they're very tech native. They haven't had to have these face-to-face conversations that maybe previous generations have had to have. And so I know you only asked for one mistake, but I'm going to give you actually 3. So the first mistake is just not asking for these conversations or interviews in the first place. You know, they're just scared. They're scared to put themselves out there, which anybody in any generation might be. So I don't blame them. But once you get it, get over that hump of asking once or twice, it becomes easier and easier. So mistake number 1 is simply not asking. Mistake number 2 is if somebody agrees to speak to you, you need to prepare. You can't just go in blind. So you should do research on that person who has agreed to speak to you and not waste their time asking questions that you can find the answer to online. You shouldn't say, "How long have you done this?" or things like, "What's your job title?" You should know those things going in. You should prepare really meaningful questions to drive your interview. So, what surprised you most coming into this job? Or what do you like the most? Or what skill set doesn't anybody talk about? Those are the
Mm.
things that you can't find online. And then the third mistake is actually not following up. And what I mean by that is, sure, send off a quick thank you. But then a couple of weeks later, or when it makes sense, follow up and tell them how your conversation actually helped you.
Mm.
"Oh, I applied this thing that you said today." Or, let them know that they made a difference in your life by explaining that conversation and how it applied to your job search or your
Well,
job role or whatever it may be. So let them know they really did help.
I can imagine if I were in an interview with a Gen Z professional that I would really appreciate that they took something away from it and it was of value.
Exactly.
Fantastic. So we often think we need to prove ourselves before we ask for help or before we step into these conversations. But real growth happens when we're willing to be seen before we're quote unquote ready.
Yeah.
So, how did asking for help or guidance shape your path? And what advice do you give to someone who's afraid to look unprepared?
When I was in New York at what I was considering, my dream place to work, I was in magazine journalism. That's what I wanted to do. I had moved into an editor role at a
Wow.
magazine, but I really knew my potential was probably what's called a managing editor. They manage all of the editors. They're essentially second in command at a magazine. And I knew I could be in that role. So what I did is I asked to speak with the managing editor, come sit down with me, explain what you do. And I asked, "Can you train me in these things?" And that's kind of a bold move. Like, "Hey, I want to take your job someday. Teach me how to do it." Right. But she was willing and she did. She trained me in the different processes that I needed to know, the responsibilities, how to handle budgets, layouts, all those things that were really her job. And I think it made sense for her because she knew she had other bigger aspirations beyond that. So it wasn't like a huge threat, but it still took guts to go and do that, to ask her to do those things. The advice that I would give is you have to understand that when you ask for help, nobody's going to fixate on that because what's going to happen is you are going to accelerate your learning, your productivity, your, skills and value are going to accelerate so fast. Everybody's going to be thinking about that and how great you are essentially. And they're not ever going to be like, "Oh, but she asked for help and that's terrible." Like
Mm.
that's not what their mindset is. Their mindset is going to be looking at your growth and how it has outpaced your peers. And that's what I would say. Focus on that and focus on how you can add value to the people around you. And that's what they're going to focus on. So you don't have to be worried or scared about asking for help because the outcome is what's going to be the headline, right? And that's what happened to me. I actually did get that managing editor role within a year,
Wow.
so I think it was well worth asking for that help.
Yeah, so I do want to go back to the person that you asked for help from. For she knew she wanted to get to another role. And so by having you learn that role, she now has someone to fill her spot so she can move up.
Exactly. And being a leader today, that's exactly what I tell everybody. I tell myself, I tell the leaders and the people that are on my team, backfill your position because you can't move up, you can't be promoted if there's nobody to fill your role. So if you're doing a good job training the people below you, it makes it much easier for your boss to look at you and say, "Oh, great. Sally can take your role, so Debbie, you can move up." It's good planning on your part and it is not a threat.
Yeah. I think if someone's listening to the podcast right now and this is like an aha moment, a light bulb, take a pause, write it down, and follow up on this one step. So, how did you
Absolutely.
personally decide to ask for help? And how did you know to go to that person? I'm sure there were other managing editors you could have turned to.
So, yeah, I think it's about finding the person who has accomplished what you want to accomplish. So in this instance, she was the managing editor of the one specific magazine that I wanted to be at. There were others in the company. They worked at different magazines that maybe weren't the best fit for me. So she had accomplished the one thing that I knew this is like the one role, the one thing that I want to do. And she was willing to do it. She was kind. She was helpful in other ways along the way. So it kind of gave me that inkling that she would be okay with that. But if you don't know the person and you don't have that inkling, it's okay to still ask the people who have accomplished what you want to accomplish in life. Or if they're in a industry that you're thinking about getting into, a different type of role within a bigger company, if you want to switch departments or something, they have already done the thing that you want to do. So that is the type of person that you can go and ask. And if you have personal access to them, then that's, a pretty I don't want to say easy because we already talked about how it takes a lot of guts to go and do that, but at least you have the roadmap to get there. What I do want to note is you can also quote unquote ask for help from people that you don't have a personal connection to. So what that means to me is throughout my career, I've read so many books, listened to so many podcasts from people who have no idea who I am. So, I think the people who are putting their best work out there and being educational, being helpful, they are doing that to help you, and you should take advantage of that, even if they have no idea who you are. So I just want to put that out there. There's that personal route, but then there's also all of this information, out there in educational ways that you can apply as well.
So if she would have said no, you would have taken advantage of that other route, I'm guessing.
Oh, yeah. And I'm sure that I have in different ways, learning how to be a better editor, a better leader, those types of things, or ask different people, of course. But, there's not just one way. There's always tons of ways that you can ask for the help that you need.
So in your journalings, in the things on your podcast, you've talked about decoding unspoken workplace dynamics and who gets included in key conversations because, the meeting before the meeting is often more important than the meeting itself, as is the meeting after the meeting, talking about what happened in the meeting. But, and these are key conversations, and who gets included in those conversations is often about relationships, not resumes. What do you wish more Gen Z women and purpose-minded professionals understood about building workplace relationships that lead to growth and opportunity?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And what I wish more people knew or understood is that curiosity and confidence is going to outrank your credentials. So you may have a lot of bullet points on your resume, or you may not have enough bullet points on your resume, right? But what's going to matter is when you are in the workplace, showing up, asking questions, putting yourself in the room like you're talking about, finding ways to get into that room and showing that you're willing to learn and take on those challenges. So, to your point, how do you get into those meetings before the meetings or the meetings after the meetings? There's a couple ways. You need to ask, if you want to be involved in a conversation, ask. But sometimes asking isn't enough. So, you need to figure out how you can add value. So, you need to be asking the right questions. And that might come in the form of, why aren't we doing it this way? Or why haven't we considered this? Putting yourself in a solution oriented mindset and asking the right questions and opening up leadership's minds, that's a really good way to get in there. Another one is to maybe bring ideas to the table. We have this challenge, right? So the company has this challenge. Let's try this. Let's try this solution. What about this referral network? What about this idea? When you bring ideas to the table, not all of them are going to be good, but you're going to be noticed way more than if you're just sitting back and checking off your to-do list that you've been told to do. When you bring ideas, people want you at the table. And that doesn't mean that every idea is going to go somewhere. It doesn't mean that every idea is genius, but it just means that you are generating the ideas that will move the company or your team or your project forward. And that's the type of person that people want in those, quote unquote, before or after meetings. So that's what I would recommend that you do is have the confidence to ask, but also have the confidence to ask the right questions and bring ideas to the table, and then you will naturally be invited in.
And also, I would say start acting on the ideas, like taking a
Mhm.
role and making that, if say an idea sticks, then be part of that solution, not just an idea maker, because that's not what your job is. Your job is also to move the company forward. That's adding the value.
Absolutely. Yes. So if you bring that idea, say, of course, I want to spearhead this idea. Yes.
So, can you share a moment when a strong relationship opened a door for you and you used this idea and let me spearhead this? How did it help you? Or share a time when a lack of connection created a roadblock?
Yeah. So my day job now, I work at a digital marketing agency and my role is VP of operations, but I didn't get hired into that role. When I was hired into this agency, it was, gosh, 13 years ago now. I was hired into content marketing. So I took my journalism background and applied that to marketing in kind of the same storytelling way. And I built up this content marketing department. And I had access to our CEO. And what I was realizing is that he was still kind of working in the business instead of on the business. He would still work on accounts, he would still do sales. And what he really needed was the freedom to be able to work on the business, bring the big ideas, understand what the trends were, how the company needed to change. And he just couldn't do that because he was essentially putting out fires all the time.
Mhm.
So even though it wasn't my role, I was running this one department, right? So I was in a lane. What I ended up doing was studying him, paying attention to him, empathizing with what he needed, and then providing that. So I would put out fires. I would raise my hands for projects outside of what my role was, and it would be helpful to him. And so that grew our relationship where I essentially became his right hand person and allowed me to move into this role of VP of operations, where now it's just formalized that I do the things that need done that are nobody else's job. I do all of the things. Building that relationship was solely based on providing him value in ways that he didn't really know how to ask for. And nobody else was doing it. It was nobody's job. But I would fill those roles, fill those gaps for him. And that really created a relationship where he could count on me. And now I have, had gotten that promotion into this role where I can really make an impact on the company.
So you rose quickly in your career. You didn't wait, but you were very intentional. And visibility comes through strategic allies, not just hard work. So I could see where this relationship with your CEO, and it was genuine. You weren't using him. You were like, hey, I can help here. Let me help. You were behind the scenes. Is there anything else that you can say about nurturing that relationship? I could tell that you're quite loyal as well.
That's that's a big part of it. I mean, millennials, Gen Z, they don't necessarily stick around for more than a couple years in a role, and I've been here for 13. There is a loyalty to it. That's not the only reason. It's a good place to work, and we have and made that happen together. Our relationship together made it so that we do care about our employee work-life balance and that the culture is good and people want to come to work there, and I'm learning all the time. So that loyalty goes both ways, I think. On that side is you have to create a workplace where people want to work, but then, when you stay loyal, you get those promotions, you get nobody's micromanaging me. I have that kind of freedom. So there's a lot in that. And I think that's exactly what it takes is building that relationship into, both sides of it. So I was providing value and doing those things, but also maybe like asking the right questions, right? So asking like, hey, why are you doing it that way? Maybe we consider doing it this way. So I think both sides of it of being honest also comes into play as well. And that's a really hard pill for a lot of people to swallow who are in leadership. Luckily, that wasn't the case here. And I, being in leadership now, try to welcome that, but you have to play both sides of that and be open, not just somebody giving the value all the time, but you providing that value back.
Right. So looking at this, how can early career professionals start building these types of relationships, even if they're feeling a little bit invisible right now? And I think you've answered it, but maybe just go a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I think it's really about starting to empathize with the people around you and what they need. And we think about empathy a lot. When you hear that word, it's like, who is in a worse position than you that you can walk in their shoes and empathize with. But it also applies to just like the people around you in your daily life, your colleagues. And in this case, what we're kind of talking about are your managers, your boss, your CEO, whomever is above you. That person also has challenges, right? So, how can you be the answer to those challenges? How can you recognize them? How can you raise your hand, take on projects for them that would free up their time to work on something bigger or more impactful for the company? And simply understanding what the people around you need will definitely help with that. And then I also want to go back to what we were talking about before with those interviews, those informational interviews. If you're feeling kind of invisible, this is the way to get out of that. It is to ask for those informational interviews, not just when you're job searching, but almost anytime, right? So when you're exploring career options or you're about to graduate from college, of course, do that. But when you want to understand the day to day roles of, say, your boss or your CEO,
Mhm.
ask them for 15 minutes because what I've been talking about is like, empathize with them. But you can also just ask. You can ask, what are your challenges? And they hopefully will tell you. And then that gives you a head start on how you can help.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. And as time goes on and you learn the industry, you learn people, you kind of get an intuitive sense of what's happening and why things are happening. You're not blindsided as much.
Hmm.
So many professionals think they need that perfect pitch to connect with others. And you've pretty much said, hey, just show up curious and human. And
Yeah.
not every idea is going to stick. But what's your go to strategy or script for reaching out to someone you admire but don't know yet?
I'll give you a little secret here. Make it all about them. We're only human and we all love to be flattered, right? So if you are going to send a DM or an email, you can make it about them and it is going to probably go further than if you say, I am this. I want this. I need to know this. They're going to say, and so does, a million other people who are job searching. But if you go in there and you say, Dear Sally, I've been following your work and I would love to learn more about your path and what your day to day looks like. If you're open to a 15-minute chat, I can be super flexible to your schedule. I'd love to learn from your experience. Thank you in advance. Either way, your story has already been so impactful on my life. That tiny tinge of flattery is going to go way further than me, me, me.
Yeah, it would go very far with me, I will tell you.
Me too. That's
So,
what I've learned, I
yeah,
think it's you make it about them and it's going to go further.
yeah. So, what's one small thing listeners can do today to start building a more supportive professional community?
Yeah, something that I've really identified with lately is confidence comes from action. You don't build confidence before you take that first step. And that's so important to understand is confidence comes from action. So, what I would recommend is if you're feeling nervous about reaching out or asking for something like an informational interview, just send a message of thanks or admiration first. Don't even ask for anything. Just kind of take that first part of the script that we just said. Say, hey, I've been watching your career and I just want you to know that you are making an impact on somebody. Thank you. And that's it. Don't ask. Don't take it any further. The first step that you can do to start building that confidence is just to reach out and say thank you to somebody that has kind of inspired you.
All right. That should be an easy action right
Yep.
there. So before we move into the insider group rapid fire questions, and this is for those that have joined Spark, they get to listen to the questions that we have, or it's for the unsealed members. And those are folks that actually get tools in addition to listening. What I would like to do is have you let the listeners know where they can find you, who your ideal group is and what you will do for them.
Yeah. So I am Brianne Rush. I'm the founder of the Independence Lab, and there we simply help Gen Z women transition from college to career with confidence. And so we're building a foundation for career, money, mindset, the things that you need when you are first going into that adulthood. And that's what we're really working on. So you can find me. I'm most active on TikTok right now. I'm at Brianne Independence Lab. So it's Brianne Independence Lab. And I also do a weekly email with these types of tips in them, scripts and ways that you can get ahead in your career. And you can find that at theindependencelab.com/subscribe.
And then for those that are listening on YouTube, we'll have pictures of those websites for you. Thank you so much for being on the UnCeiling You and diving into this very strategic conversation about, really developing your career. Very much needed. I applaud you for helping women coming out of college to get into their careers. I think this conversation is going to go a long way for them. And I hope that they 100% take advantage of the resources that you have on your website. We'll make sure it's in the show notes so that they can take advantage of it.
Well, Natalie, I appreciate what you're doing. And thank you so much for having me today.
Today, you've learned some powerful lessons from Brianne Rush, why curiosity and confidence outranks credentials, the 3 networking mistakes Gen Z professionals should avoid, how asking for help accelerates growth instead of holding you back, and why relationships, not just hard work, are the true currency that moves careers forward. If you want to go deeper, there are 2 ways to grab the insider questions I ask every guest. Either support the show directly, just click the link in the show notes, or joining us inside the UnCeiling Zone, where you'll also get tools, prompts, and resources to apply these lessons in your career. Either path gives you access to bonus insights that go beyond the main episode. All the links are waiting for you inside the show notes. Thank you again for listening. Thank you for growing with me, and thank you for being part of this ripple. Until next time, keep rising.